sir. We're going to go in a little different order. I'm going to start with the vaping. And Mike is here to kind of brief you on what's going on in the district right now with vaping, policy, issues that we're having. And I told him about 15 minutes unless y'all have further questions because we've got a lot covered tonight. So, Mike.
Okay, and if you turn to the back page of your packet, it's FNCD. It's kind of it's our policy on student conduct, tobacco use and possession. So what we feel like is just on the standard vaping incidents that is classified basically in the same way as any other tobacco possession, use of on school grounds, that we have a pretty good grip on that. What I did want to kind of give y'all, and I made several copies, I didn't make enough for everyone, is kind of we have addressed in our handbook and in our code of conduct the difference between tobacco and then what happens when the tobacco crosses that line when it's no longer tobacco. So if you look on the first page there on page 86, and this is from our student handbook, student and parent handbook, it talks about the tobacco and e-cigarettes are prohibited and kind of goes through the details of that. But down at the bottom it says, additionally, any e-cigarette or any other electronic vaporizing device containing marijuana or a controlled substance will be subject to disciplinary action and referred to local law enforcement. So this is where, and to kind of show you where we're at, and then if you look on the next page, on page 31 and 32, this is from the Student Code of Conduct. And if you look under the list of conducts that require a mandatory expulsion, if you go to the very bottom of that list on page 32, it says behavior, one of the lists of mandatory expulsions is behavior punishable as a felony that involves selling, giving, or delivering to another person or possessing, using, or being under the influence of marijuana, a controlled substance, a dangerous drug, or alcohol, or committing a serious act or offense while under the influence of alcohol. So this is where, as we've kind of come into something that we feel like as a district we've had to address. We're in the process of working through it with other districts. We've met with in PEAMS, coding, and TEA and things like that. But the bottom line that we've gotten into is when we get with these vaping products, any possession of what's considered a concentrated THC, in our case it's almost always THC oil, is an automatic felony. So we have a vaping policy. We have exceptions to that in our code of conduct and in our student handbook that basically says if that vape contains a drug, then the punishment will rise to the level afforded to that drug. And since the drug of choice is typically THC oil in vaporizing products, we've had a rash of cases of students that were in possession or under the influence of a drug that according to state law and penal code is a felony offense. And so that's where we've gotten into the mandatory expulsions, because we've had several students that charged with a felony because of the possession of THC oil. And I think just the context of that is really what we wanted to display to you guys, and kind of what's going on, not just in our district, but statewide right now, is districts are determining the process that they go through to deal with this felony possession, a felony offense.
And why don't you tell them what we're doing right now as far as placement until we get back the lab results?
Mm-hmm. So when we get basically we've created some protocols to use anytime a vaporizing device is found to be on campus, a student's in possession of a vape. And if it's determined initially that there's reasonable suspicion that the vaporizing product is a THC oil, then we can go ahead and start the process at that point. So the student admits, there's some types that are identifiable, some aren't. Sometimes you can tell it's a THC oil, other times you can't. But if we have reasonable suspicion, then we can go ahead and start the expulsion process then, at the time of the offense. If not, then the evidence has to be sent to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, or Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Lab. The turnaround time on that is typically, we've seen about 4 to 5 months to get those results back. When the results come back to the local police department, whichever police department it is that has sent the evidence in, then they will refer that for a felony charge, and once we get that information, then we're able to proceed with the new information that we have, which would be to make that an expellable offense. So sometimes we know right away, sometimes it may be 4 to 5 months before we know if the device or the evidence actually contained THC oil or not.
In the case that you've already had, that's what happened, Angela had worked with you on, and then we've got another one coming up, it's the same thing, that this was something that happened last spring, we just now got the test results. But this has become a big deal for the school district. Other school districts put them in DAEP while they're waiting their test results. We have gone on to JJAEP because of the expellable offense, and based upon a conference, who went to that conference?
Clint and Stacy.
Okay, that we are certainly in line with what the state intent is as far as where do you put them while you're waiting for these test results. But, and then the other part is within our court systems is our judges are reticent many times for especially kids that are 18 years or older, am I correct? Why don't you talk to him a little bit about that, just because it goes on the record forever.
And we have very few actual cases, but in theory, as we've talked this through with other districts and we've talked this through with law enforcement, is it seems that an adult offender, sometimes prosecution is, depending on the circumstances, may not be quite as likely, because the one thing you have to remember about THC oil is any amount constitutes a felony offense if they can prove you're in possession. So as with marijuana, just regular marijuana, you have to get over 4 ounces to constitute even a state jail felony. But with THC oil, any possession is a felony offense. And so what we've kind of been told through our research and discussions is that sometimes with adults charged, they may be less likely to prosecute because of the long-term implications of a felony possession charge for something that's still fairly new technology, and maybe not, the word is, the society's not educated enough that, any possession of THC oil is a felony offense. What we've seen so far, most of the cases in Bell County that we've heard about have been juvenile cases, and most of those they have gone on to some form of adjudication, I guess, with consequences to try to teach them to stay away from this type of behavior.
And why don't you tell them too about your committee and what y'all talk about?
We do have a committee that's been working since the early summer, and it's kind of a vaping. It's a vaping committee focus group talking about issues of vaping, strategies. I mean, obviously, our big goal would be to take preventative measures to educate students on the dangers and the consequences of vaping, particularly having those products at school. So a big part of that's preventative measures and an educational component, but we also have a concern that we would like to make sure that we get the message out on these possessions of, particularly of concentrated THC products, and the consequences of those are felony offense. So we want to try to, we're going to take a concerted effort to try to not only educate our students about that, but also get some information out to our parents. And we're looking to partner with local law enforcement and maybe even DA's office to make sure that we have great information that we get out and the parents are educated on what to expect if a child is found to be in possession of THC oil or a concentrated THC product on school property.
There's kind of two components to it. There's a health component, and then there's the legal component. And the discussion this morning was we need to let parents and students know about that legal component. The health component is controversial. It depends on which medical study that you look at, or that you study, whether or not it's dangerous or not. But that's really not our role right now. Our role is to get out good information on the consequences, the legal consequences if a child is caught with THC, because they're dire.
And we want to arm them with as much information as we can, so that as they make choices, and try to give them the information to avoid these types of situations.
And maybe, you know, if we scare them up on the legal side, maybe they won't do it, and it will help their health too. So, you know, you try to, it's kind of like drug dogs, you use it as a preventative thing. I think this maybe could be a preventative thing for kids too. So Mike is gonna work with his group on getting something out pretty quick on the parent and the kid side. Angela and I talked about that today too, so. Okay, y'all have any other questions on
Yeah,
vaping?
where do you draw the line? You said that sometimes it's clear that it is THC oil, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's
A
not.
student, an example would be a student's obviously under the influence, has the device on their person, under the influence. Some of the, you know, you have to remember that these things are legal in some states, so sometimes some of the cartridges are labeled. I mean, it's a product. We've even seen it in the form of edibles, THC oil, and gummy products and different things like that. So
So it's not
sometimes
just vaping.
it's not just vaping. Sometimes it's in an edible product, and on the bag it says it's a THC concentrate. So I mean, we've seen not only have we seen that, but as our discussions with law enforcement and other school districts, those are some of the things that people are seeing. So a confession, a labeling of the product, or some type of other product that may not even be a vaping product that contains a concentrated THC amount.
Yeah, you also mentioned, Raman, you had mentioned that there was a concern about what we do with these students if a substance is sent to the crime lab, the DPS crime lab, and you wait 4 or 5 months. What is the state's policy on that?
What was it for? Did I miss
No.
any?
Okay. So, what are we doing with those kids?
Well, right now, we're going on and processing them as a JJAP placement.
If there's reasonable
Right.
evidence that it is a THC product.
This is the one where some school districts are doing the DAEP
Mhm.
placements. I don't think there are any districts out there that are just going, oh, we're gonna wait for 5 or 6 months. You know, their two options are the, you raise your eyebrows, you never know. But as far as I know, that most of them are doing a DAEP or a JJP, and most of them are the DAEP placement. The trouble is, you have so much time between the time of the incident and the time that you actually assign them to JJP or the expulsion, just because you're waiting for those results.
That is frustrating. I mean, it's frustrating for everyone involved, but it's just, that's the amount of time it takes.
Are there times when something is sent to the crime lab and the kid is still not in DAP or any other place other than?
That could happen. If a student had a 45-day DAP placement and the results were not back from the crime lab at the end of those 45 days, it absolutely could happen.
Some districts are not testing for THC. They're just saying every vape is a 45-day placement. And that's a different.
But our concern here is about the felony, right? Whether it rises to the level of a felony or not.
Right, and the fact that, when you hear kids talking, that their full understanding of the spectrum of vaping, and that 2 vapes can look identical, but if one of them has the THC oil in it, that can rise to a felony even though the vapes looked identical. And knowing that, whereas, the difference between a cigarette and marijuana, but even then the THC oil, like you were saying on this chart, is so concentrated. It's the equivalent of, what did you say today, like 4 pounds of
Yeah, it's a 4 ounces to 5 pounds of marijuana is the same level of offense as less than 1 gram of a concentrate.
So this, Dr. Kincannon had seen this as a real issue last spring and started the committees and stuff, and she talked with me at that point in time. And I understand why. I mean, it's bubbling up all over the place.
So if I look at just the student, right, and their educational success, let's forget about the vaping thing for a minute, right? right? So, I mean, does a placement in one area more successful or less successful, and then sort of being educationally successful, right, in the meantime, right? I mean, I would imagine DAAP is maybe a little bit more supportive than the JJEP placement. And, you know, do we cause more problems for ourselves going to JJEP? I mean, I'm not entirely clear what the question is we're being asked, right, to figure out, but when I'm thinking about this, right, I'm like, geez, do we going straight to JJ might cause more problems. I don't know.
You know, we're not even asking a question.
Yeah,
Chris.
yeah.
We just want y'all to know that this is a problem right now.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's sticky.
It is very sticky.
Yeah, yeah,
So a lot of times sticky problems end up back into policy, and we just
Right.
wanted y'all to kind of have everything.
well, I mean, the way I read this, like looking at page 86, I can't remember which document this came out of, right, but the way I read this is just even an electronic vaping device, whether it's contains anything or not, actually would cause this to be true, or, you know, cause punishment. Is that true? Yeah,
And if it contains a controlled substance,
yeah,
then the minimum punishment would be a 45-day DAEP placement.
right,
And this just depends on where that controlled substance falls in the penal code or the schedule of controlled substances on how severe that punishment would be.
but if they had a device but it didn't have anything in it, right, as an empty device,
Mhm.
what happens there?
That, it goes under a general, it's
Just
3 to
local
5 days of
school.
ISS
Yeah.
typically.
Okay.
Same thing as possession of tobacco.
Yeah.
So what's the greatest concern here?
That kids are making choices and probably not understanding
Yeah.
the ramifications of those
You know,
choices.
we've had several that have come up recently, and that's a concern.
The other concern is how we're handling that, right? I mean, like what Chris is talking about, I mean, what's the, you talked about an adult, you know, even the local prosecutors are reluctant to prosecute an 18-year-old because of long-term ramifications. So if we put a kid in DAEP or JAEP, I mean, that could have long-term implications as well.
Yeah, but the one thing is, once it's a felony offense, I guess that's the biggest point,
We
is
have
we have no
false statement.
choice at that
Right.
point. So it's
Yeah.
a mandatory expulsion when
Right.
there's a felony offense.
Yeah, once it gets there, I think it's clear cut. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to figure out at what point, where does the support from an educational standpoint stop?
And begin.
Yeah, where do we cause more problems for ourselves?
You know, we've tried to be consistent with law.
Yeah,
And when it's other devices or other types of drugs in there, we follow law, and that's the reason we go to DAP. And if we are consistent with that philosophy, then it's a JJAP.
yeah.
Understood. Okay. Angela, any concerns from your standpoint?
Where do you want me to start? First of all, I think we need to remember we have pending matters before the
Sure.
board
Mhm.
Right.
that
Understood.
relate to the expulsion of proposed, or appeals of expulsion related to THC oil. But I think primarily the focus is, or I guess maybe we want to remember that our student code of conduct is real clear, and that parents are given notice and students are given notice that if they bring these devices with a controlled substance, that they are subject to being placed in a DAP or expelled. And you have to remember that an administrator only needs to have a reasonable belief that the elements of the offense occurred, which is a really low standard, and the law is very differential to our administrators. So an administrator who gets a vape with a cartridge that may not be marked, but has a sticky substance that the administrator's been trained by law enforcement to know is probably THC. And remember, our student code of conduct talks about how the administrator develops a reasonable belief based on all the circumstances available, including hearsay upon hearsay. They interview and investigate all the kids around how this vape ended up in this kid's backpack or in this kid's hand or pocket. And if the administrator determines at that point that they have a reasonable belief that this vape had THC oil, then we could proceed with a DAP or JJAP expulsion without the lab results at all. So I think what administrators are, we always want to err on the side of what's in our best interest of our kids. But administrators also have a legal duty to report criminal activity and criminal offenses to law enforcement. And our law enforcement expects our administrators to report when they have confiscated a device that may have a controlled substance in it. So when you say, well, what's in the best interest of the kids,
Yeah.
I think what we expect our administrators to do is follow our code of conduct.
Right.
And right now, Texas law has defined or placed THC in that controlled substance category of a felony. So our administrators, to a certain extent, have their hands tied. But our expectation is also that they apply your code of conduct and policy consistently.
Oh, it's gotta be consistent.
Gotta be consistent, so until, state law changes and the penal code changes the way it is categorizing THC, then our administrators have a responsibility to handle that THC like any other controlled substance.
So there are a lot of times when the administrator has no discretion.
Absolutely.
It is non-discretion, I mean, the law requires it.
Right, and I know, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I think that Student Services has trained administrators that when they confiscate a device that may have a controlled substance, that they're responsible to give, they need to immediately hand that over to an SRO, because then you have issues of chain of custody,
Yeah.
and an administrator does not want to have a controlled substance in their desk drawer, in their pocket, in their
Right.
hand.
Yeah.
So they have a responsibility to immediately report that.
Under state law.
Yeah, understand.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of parents don't understand that. I mean, the administrator's hands are tied. You have to comply with state law.
They don't really have the option to look the other way.
They don't.
Yeah.
It's non-discretionary.
So is there anything we need to do to better support the staff and administration as part of this, right? Like, are there any holes in sort of the policies and procedures where we can make things, I don't know, clearer, right? To better aid from the staff side, right?
Well, you're gonna get a huge legal update, 114, I don't know if this is part of that, and that there are some local components. So that's a real good question, I don't
Yeah.
have a good answer for you at this point in time.
Yeah. Make the gray not as gray, right?
Well,
Better protect the staff.
yes.
Yeah.
You know, whenever you talk with parents or hear from parents in whatever capacity, you know, I think the word needs to be very consistent, that our hands are tied, that this is
Yeah.
a legal issue beyond our school district and beyond the administrators, and to support by word of mouth, I think would be really important. That you all discuss this as part of your board report and the workshop for policy, I think is important too, because again, it starts educating, because that goes in minutes, they'll go into videotapes, but that's a way again to start educating, and people do watch these committee videotapes. So it's a really good way for people to hear the discussion related to these different policies and laws. And as far as future policies, there may be some that comes up. Again, we're still waiting for the state to find out exactly where we head, and we don't know yet on this one.
And technology's evolving very rapidly
Right.
in these fields, and so we have to stay in touch with law enforcement and you know, what's on the horizon, and try to stay trained on what to look for and what to see, and also educate our kids and things too. I mean, technology's moving faster than the law and policy sometimes on
Right.
this, so.
Yeah, we want to, send out our information to students and parents, but at the same time that y'all talk about it at the board meeting, because then they'll get it 3 ways.
Mhm.
And again, it shows very consistent messaging throughout the whole school district, and so the timing of it is important too.
I see the need for a Tiger Media PSA. Let's film one and.
Well, your vaping committee's been
Yeah.
doing good work.
Yeah.
And that's since the
Yeah.
summer.
But keeping up with the changing technology, I mean, it could be that the next thing actually is an electronic vaping device. It could be an electronic vaporizing device. It could be some other technology, right?
It will be.
And so to the extent that we can be generic but still catch this stuff. I mean, it could be an electronic delivery device maybe.
But you're setting a precedent.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that whatever the legal is,
Yeah,
based upon the drug of choice or the object of choice, that we're following in line with that, i.e. the DAP or the JJAP, depending upon what's in the vape, that does set a precedent for
Yeah.
whatever the future beholds, and there will be something else.
And I think regardless of the delivery device, it's what's in that device, it's what sets the consequences. If it's a
Yeah.
bottle of whiskey, there's one set of consequences. If
Yeah.
it's a bong with marijuana, there's one set of consequences. If it's a THC oil or
yeah,
black tar heroin, or it just depends on what the penal code says the punishment is
yeah.
for whatever it is that they have in possession of.
And that's the message.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of parents do is they look and they look ahead and say, well, this is a defense in the courtroom, but we're not in the courtroom. This is an administrative thing. The public policy of the state of Texas is written down, and the administrators have to follow it, and we don't have any choice, irrespective of what a court may or may not do.
Right.
And I think
And we don't,
that,
and you know, to go along with what you're saying is, we don't meet a lab result.
that's right, that's right.
And because a lot of the times these administrators, when they suspect, are having to turn that device over to law enforcement's testing it. And so it's out of our hands.
That's right.
We don't have any control.
And we have a duty to protect every other child.
That's right. Yeah, we're simply following the public policy of the state of Texas. The legislature has spoken on it, and we've got to follow it.
That's correct. Right, correct. Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just, and you know, it's when we get that notice from law enforcement of the felony, then that also ties the hand of the administrator. When we get notice that a felony has been charged, then that's when, if JJAEP expulsion proceedings haven't been started, they will be. And then, of course, the family's entitled to due process, and we consider mitigating factors and all of the circumstances surrounding the situation. But once we get that notice, which we will get if whatever it is has been sent for testing is positive for a controlled substance, then we have no, our administrators are, we expect them to follow our process.
We're under order of state law to follow the expulsion no matter what,
Correct.
no matter whether there's a defense or not in the courtroom.
All right, any other discussion on vaping, THC? We know where we're at. Next one is, and Mike, you can stay if you want.
I'll stay.
Or whoever can stay if you want, or you can go, whatever you wish to. Board operating procedures. You have the current board operating procedures, and there are some extras over here if you want them. The other thing that you have is a highlight sheet, if you did not get one of these. And what this is Angela pulled 5 or 6 school districts' board operating procedures. And I went through and read them and highlighted some of the key components of it, and that's what these are. So if you read them, great. If you did not, then these are kind of the highlights. Between the two, you see the first one up here is Round Rock. And Round Rock was not one that Angela gave me because it wasn't a written one, and they've got some on a website that I wanted you to look at. So that's kind of a separate component. And then up here, simplistic as this may look, but it does have some order to it. On the red side, these are things that are in your current board operating procedures manual. And you're supposed to review this annually, so that's what we're doing. So that's what's in there by title. The stuff that's in the green are the things that were in the other 5 to 6 operating manuals for those school districts that were not part of your current operating procedures manual. Okay. So, and then up at the very top where it says orange, what y'all need to start doing, and we may not finish, but begin, is looking at what you have and deciding what you want to keep, number 1, what you want to tweak, number 2, and then the things that you wish to add, number 3. And I just thought maybe that would help us kind of guide the discussion on the board operating procedures manual. Manual, you have looked at, manual on the manual, you have looked at this quite a bit, so I'm gonna let you start the conversation about what you would like to see in your current board operating procedures manual, and we will follow with you on that one. And then we can go to the tweaks, and then we can go to what you wish to add.
Okay, of all these school districts, the procedures that I've looked at, the ones that Angela provided us, I didn't see Round Rock until we put it up on the screen, but the ones that Angela had pulled for us, they all seem to have a common theme amongst them, you know, because I think we're all on the same page as to what we're supposed to be doing. But some are more clear than others. If I were a member of the public, for example, and I wanted to address the school board, how would I go about doing that? I don't think that we serve the public by telling them 15 seconds before they start talking what they're supposed to do or not do and how they're supposed to conduct themselves. So that's something that I think needs to be added. Comments on agenda items and non-agenda items. I think that folks need to be able to go either to a website or to read the documents in our board policy and procedures and determine before they walk in the door what they can and can't do. And I think that also goes for us as a school board. How can we address the person that's addressing the public, or the public person coming in and talking to us about an agenda item, for example? What can we get into a dialogue with them? Because most of these, if not all of them, basically say you can ask the person to clarify their position or to get more information. But my question is, can we ask that person a question about an item? And it may not necessarily be seeking more information, but you just need more clarification. You don't want to get into a dialogue where you're actually arguing a position, but you want to understand where the person is coming from and how much can we address a person, Angela?
Well, so, if it's an item that's not on your agenda, you cannot have a conversation with them about it, because you haven't given notice to the public
Right.
that you're going to be discussing that. So if a member of the public comes up and comments to you guys about something you've never heard of before, I think you can ask a clarifying question with the goal of figuring out who should we refer this person to, or maybe to get more information while they're there for administration, so administration knows how to handle the
So we know what the issue is. We need to
Right.
narrow the issue down.
Right. And also, sometimes you need to make sure, the board president, and you have to make sure you don't invite comments or criticism about one of your employees that would be more appropriately handled through a
Right,
grievance or through HR. But if they're coming to talk to you about something that's not on your agenda, other than getting clarification from them, the board cannot have a conversation.
Right, okay.
That's a simple.
So you said what I wanted you to say.
Okay.
And the second thing is, the first step would be to narrow the issue down so that administration can take it from there. And if it needs to be put on the agenda at some point in the future, then it can,
Yes.
or it can be resolved
Yes,
administratively.
hopefully.
What if it's an agenda item?
Okay. If it's an agenda item, remember that board meetings are, board of trustee meetings held in public.
Right.
They are your meeting with the agenda, upon which your superintendent and board officers have agreed. So keep that as a premise, and that's kind of the foundation for what I'm going to say next, which is, it really wouldn't be appropriate to allow someone to come into your meeting with their comment about your agenda item that then kind of hijacks your meeting, where then the seven of you are having a conversation, argument, debate, back and forth with this person who's coming from the public to comment on your agenda item. Because it is your meeting. And so I don't know that it's much different than someone commenting on a non-agenda item, in that you wanna get clarification of the person's perspective, so you can put it in context. We already asked folks to tell us where they live. So first of all, we know whether they're a taxpayer or not, whether they're a parent or not. And then perhaps if they have a comment about an agenda item, gathering enough information that it's meaningful contribution for the board to consider. But I think beyond that, I do not think it would be appropriate for the board to begin to question and answer someone who comes up to speak. Now, one thing that is going to be addressed in update 114, and is really appropriate for your board operating procedures, is for you guys to decide how much time you are going to allow someone. And right now it's 5 minutes, and different boards have different time limits. But see, that's another consideration. If you have a time limit for someone of 3 minutes, that really doesn't allow for the board to have a conversation with that person anyway.
Right.
And even 5 minutes, y'all know, most of the time anyone who speaks, that timer goes off in 5 minutes, isn't it? So you think about that, you're really, beyond the 5 minutes, if you're gonna ask a clarifying question, okay, but much more than that, then it's going to be hard to consistently apply your guidelines to every person who comes up to speak after that. Because you may have someone speak who you really wanna talk to and hear more from, but then the next person, maybe not. But then you've given this person 15 minutes because you engaged in kind of a conversation with them, and this person you didn't. So I think it may be more about enforcing your time limits, which your board operating procedures need to clarify. And then if you ask a question beyond that, okay. And then I think the farther you stray beyond your time limit, then you get into some fairness problems, because you don't know who's coming up next. And the new legislation doesn't allow the board to limit the total amount of time that you can hear from the public. So depending on what the topic is, you could have
100 people.
100 people.
Yeah, all of these procedures that we looked at, a lot of them have 20, 25 minutes, but that's no longer
No longer,
long.
no, and none of the procedures that we pulled up are are revised, because I think most folks are waiting to see what TASB recommends as your new BED local policy. And they're gonna give you the option of, the board can limit public comment just to agenda items. You can say, we'd also be willing to hear items not on our agenda. And then you can decide how much time you wanna give each person, but you can't, no longer can you require a spokesperson for a group. So anyone who has something to say is allowed to speak. You can't limit the time.
Right. So I think that we should have, in other words, a member of the public should be able to read our policy and procedure and know what they can and can't do. I mean, I think, period.
Yeah, and I think, when you sign up for public comment now, I think there might be an admonition to them that it's not appropriate to complain about an employee or bring up a
Right.
student matter, because that's not appropriate for public comment, we have a process for that.
Right.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So right now, it's limited to posted agenda items, but and then last meeting, did y'all have those two options that TASB's thinking about for local policy,
No.
BED? So they have been, working on, what they're going to propose to you guys as options. But when we get that in the next few weeks, you'll be able to decide, we'll get really clear options from TASB. Agenda item, non-agenda
Non-agenda.
item, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, they'll be, different.
And this or this public forum is a little different from the regular board meeting, according to TASB. This one says it has to be on posted agenda items, which committee, TASB said that's fine. Board meeting, no, they can talk about anything. So there's two different ones now that they're used to not doing.
Right, and then I think, so your policy, your BED local policy is gonna have your public comment, your new public comment policy. And then your operating procedures is where, you would put, similar to what Round Rock has on their website regarding public comment, just kind of process. And you know how often, the board president might say, we're unable to have a conversation with you about this because the Open Meetings Act. That'd be something that would be appropriate in your operating procedures, and then something that you give folks on the website that says if you intend to come and speak to the board, be aware that these are the restrictions, I guess, or limitations that the Open Meetings Act places on the board.
So my question to you then, on the Round Rock stuff, and I put it up here so you can see it, and this, I give Deanna all the credit for this, because she's down all this stuff. This is one that they've got, and we can certainly, adapt this to go on our website. And it's at the very beginning of there, so you don't have to really dig very deep. Again, we have to change, with the 20 minutes it's listed here. But they talk about comments that are not on the agenda, which is something we just talked about, so we can absolutely adapt that one. It goes on down, agenda requests, complaints, concerns, disruptions, and apparently Round Rock had a lot of disruptions, because in a lot of their SOP, they talk a lot about disruptions. And when you see these different manuals, you can really tell what the issues for the school boards were. And then they've got, contacting the board, which is
Yes.
another really good one.
That's the copy I just passed out.
Yeah. You know, what Deanna really liked about this is it was the step 1, step 2, step 3, it was just really concise how to contact the board.
I think it would be helpful even from, not only in the, if this, say this similar, or this or a similar process was adopted, not only reference to contacting the board, but contacting a superintendent, contacting an assistant superintendent, because we could all operate under the same, and I feel like we do right now in terms of we try to send them back, but it's not necessarily a formal stated process that we have. And I know it would just be helpful, I just liked how clear it was.
Okay, so do y'all want us to work on something like this?
I would.
Okay, we'll bring it back to you next time, or I'll send it to you prior. And we'll take specifically the contacting the board piece of that, and then we'll take the other one about the board meetings that we just saw too. And so we'll work on those two.
Well, we need to wait till we get our BED local policy
That's true.
fleshed out,
Yeah,
to make sure that what we say about public comment is consistent with what the board decides to do with that.
This follows our practice.
Yes,
It's just
contacting
not,
the
it's
board,
just not
that's a separate.
formally
Right.
written.
Okay, the next part then is going through your current, SOP, or operating procedures. Right now, you've got trustees administration, your operating procedure review, which you gotta review it every year. Assuming you want to keep that. Agenda preparation, do you like it? Do you wanna tweak it? What do you wanna do with it?
And one thing I saw sort of consistently across several of the operating procedures was how to get items on the agenda, right? And so I think most were, hey, look, you know, the superintendent can add an item the president can add an item,
Yes.
and in some cases, board members could add an item if it was 2 or more. I read one of them where,
Some
you
with
know,
3 or more.
yeah, and then I think I read one that was just,
I think
Anybody
Leander's
could-
2 or more, and
yeah.
Katie's 3 or more.
yeah,
Your policy's 2 or more.
2 or more. Mhm.
yeah.
And you've got a little bit of the tap down on the top of page 3 on the current one.
Page number screwed up here.
I'm talking about, questions that concern non-agenda items will be addressed
Yeah.
when appropriate.
Again, that can be refined, y'all can do what you want with it. If you see a wording in one of the others that you like better, then we can use that one.
Alright, so I'm not finding where it is in ours.
The 2 or more,
Yeah,
it's in your policy, and
okay,
I think it's BE local,
okay.
and I don't have my computer.
Yeah, I mean, reading the other operating procedures, I didn't really see anything that jumped out at me as like, oh, well, why is that in there? Like, you know, anything that I would immediately throw off the bus for being ridiculous, right? I mean, it all seemed pretty reasonable, you know, to be in there. The question is, you know, how detailed do we really want it to be? I think we do, in general, probably need to beef up what we've got. But some of these were in painful detail, and, you know, do we really
Yeah,
need to
I'm
get
not
there?
sure you want
Yeah,
that.
I'm not sure we need to get to that full
You know,
extreme.
think, both of y'all are relatively new on the board, so think
Yeah.
about when you came on the board, what are the things that surprised you or that you needed to know? And let that guide you, because this is
Yeah.
your, kind of your training manual.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think about it as, you know, how do we conduct our business, right? And sort of the biggest piece of that, where the trouble places there, right, to some extent, are setting expectations with the public, right? So I agree with, hey, look, you know, having the communication aspect of it in there, right? And whether that's, you know, somebody raising a complaint, whether that's the media, whether it's, you know, whatever, right? So kind of more fully flushing that out, and I like setting the expectations in advance of this is what you're gonna see when you get there, before you're in the meeting signing this, right? So, I mean, so I didn't go through here and necessarily say, oh, it's gotta be this language, I was just more thinking of it, sort of generally.
Okay.
You know, Leander has, on page 2, item B2, they state, and this is a section placing items on the agenda, they state any board member may propose a subject for consideration by the board. We kind of cover that with those 2 standing items that we have at the end of each meeting. So if you've got, in other words, if a board member has an issue that they want addressed in another meeting, they just need to voice it at that time.
Right. It just may or may not get there.
That's right.
So,
We don't say.
I'm not suggesting we have a problem with that, by the way, it's just.
Talking about the waiter app.
Angela, is there a deadline about when we're supposed to, if we have an item that we want placed on there? If we didn't bring it up in the previous meeting, is there a deadline in our procedures for a board member to bring something up?
Rules, right?
When it should be on the agenda when requested?
No, if I call Robin, I said,
Oh.
Robin, I would like this item put on there, how much time do I need to? Say again?
Yeah, just
72 hours.
No, and that's for notice, but I'm talking about when you're preparing,
Yeah.
of course. How much time would you prefer?
You know, Suzanne and I, we meet a week prior to board meetings, and that's when we set the agenda. So we would need to have that request prior to that meeting, because that's the time we get together.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think setting that guideline out, right, and I think terming it as a guideline, so that if something were to come up that, you know, was an extenuating circumstance, it still could, you know, be addressed, but I think setting that guideline seems reasonable.
The only other option that you got in this, with this board, is you do have committees. And so some things, you know, can be remanded to a committee, and they may not be a board agenda, they may be a policy committee agenda or a facilities committee, so you might wanna add that too.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything really about committees in ours.
Well, that's
So,
new, so. that'll be
yeah,
something.
so that would be something we wanna throw in there.
we say that we can, in our policy.
We do say we can.
We can do
Yeah.
it.
Okay, so we will add those pieces, we'll talk about a week prior to the meeting, we'll add that. If you want to have an agenda item put on the next meeting's agenda, and that would get it to the board
Mhm.
president and the superintendent in time to do that or to consider it.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else in those two sections then?
I did like what I saw, again, across several of these in relation to the consent agenda, right? And just setting out the expectation for
Yeah,
what can go there and what shouldn't go there. And then it just feels like a good thing from a transparency standpoint, right? To make sure that, we're not trying to put anything over on somebody.
did you like it where it had it listed, the possible things that could be on this?
Yeah, I saw that in a couple different ones. They had them specifically enumerated, kind of,
Yeah.
these are the things that would go.
And I think that was in here too.
To some extent, I think that's actually some protection for us a little bit, assuming we follow what we put on paper. So,
We could follow it perfectly.
yeah.
So that was page 6. In the highlighted one that I gave you, Chris, it says consent agenda items, and it gave a list of them. This may not be inclusive, but at least it's a beginning.
Right.
So we will add that. In yours, on page 3, the opening of regularly scheduled meetings, that again, we'll need to wait to see what we get out of Ted and Alan. And that will substantially change. We know that one. Now, Manuel, this is what you were talking about, bottom page 3, board member response and public participation section of the board meeting. That's straight up what you were referring to earlier.
Right. A lot of the other districts, they have you have it up there, code of ethics, they have it spelled out early on.
Okay.
Angela, we don't have a separate, you can look at our procedures as a whole and say, well, that's an ethical thing.
You do, you
Yeah.
have a code of ethics, and I think it's
It's in your policy.
maybe,
It's not in your operating procedure, but
it's in your policy. I got it, let's see. Maybe BDAA, or maybe even earlier BAA, which is code of ethics for work.
But
In
this-
your, in local policy.
Now, this is the Round Rock model.
And they probably summarize,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And I noticed another one, I forget which one, they kind of put them in categories. There was one that was trust, and then one was communication, but they basically took those and they clustered them. So this is what Round Rock has, we can absolutely put a code of ethics in your, which would be a summary, it would not be policy, but that, we could put that in your operating procedures. So you want me to put one in here and let y'all take a look at it?
Yeah, I also like Katie's,
Okay. Let's see these now.
it's on page 4 of theirs, page 4.
It may not be in my summary. Okay. We will put that one in, and then y'all can work with that one.
That's pretty
Okay.
all-inclusive, that one, the Katie ones.
It is, yeah.
Was that the one that had the different categories?
No, it's one long running list of bullets,
Yeah.
but,
Okay.
Can you pull yours up, Chris, since you've got BAA, can you look to see?
I can't.
We could pull it
I wonder how different Katie's is from,
From ours.
I think probably your local policy is, I don't know that it's unique. So anytime you look at a local policy online,
Yes.
if you look down at the bottom, you'll see, A, B, so rarely I've seen a C or D, or an X. If it has an X, that means the Belton ISD Board of Trustees made changes to the template or proposal by TASB. If it's an A or a B, those are TASB proposed template policies. And a lot of times they'll have, let's say, a large school district versus a small district version of a local, and they'll have an A and a B. Not all local policies have A to B, but most do. But if you have an X,
Yeah,
that
we don't see,
means
I don't see an
someone-
X in section B for us anyway.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that means all of our local policies under B are TASB proposed. As we have adopted them over the years as they have been presented by TASB. We haven't made any changes. But if you looked at like EIC, you'd find an X, for example.
Oh, okay, now I'm seeing the X.
At the
Alright,
very
so
bottom of the
BAA
footer.
local, we do have an X.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and so,
See, I'm not
I
feeling
Sorry.
it.
see.
yeah, there you
I'll turn up the brightness for you.
go. So it's some, and what does it say the board last, amended that last at the bottom?
84?
Yes.
1984.
Leap day of 1984.
Okay,
Yeah, 229.
there you go. There you go.
And
So
Wow.
in 1984, the Belton ISD board made changes to what TASB proposed.
I
and
never
that's
knew
it.
that's what that X meant.
That's it.
Well, there you go, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've learned my thing today, I'm good, see ya.
I didn't know, I didn't know either.
And
Okay.
also Connie keeps an archive of all of your policies, so if you ever wanted to know what was changed and why,
Mm.
we have it.
So you wanted me to pull up BBA?
Well, I thought you did find the code of ethics, BAA?
I didn't.
Oh,
know.
there's BAA,
Is that
board
the
legal
code?
status, powers and duties.
No. So you're in there. Code of
Hold on, I
ethics.
just saw it, board member ethics, here we go, BBF.
Okay, thank you. So is that an A, B, or X?
It is an A.
Okay, so there you go.
So
The code-
we
And you know what, it looks oddly like
We follow
the Katie one.
there you go.
TASB's
Yeah.
legend, we follow TASB's legend, you know, like,
Yes, we do,
okay.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Alright,
so here,
okay.
yeah,
Okay,
this looks
So I
pretty
bet
much like
that's
the
Katie.
list.
so the
it's Katie.
TASB model,
It
it's
does.
Yeah,
So it's yours.
yeah.
they've got categories. They've got equity, trustworthy, honor and conduct, integrity of character, commitment to service, and student-centered focus.
Yeah, and that's exactly the TASB policy. So I guess what I don't wanna do
You don't-
is I don't wanna duplicate a bunch of things in the operating procedures in the policy.
That's correct.
So, yeah,
That's correct.
Yeah,
yeah.
And you have to decide which things are really important to you. You know, things that may be really critical to you, that may be okay to duplicate, but you don't want to do it very often.
Right.
Because, I mean, you'll have a policy meeting in front of you.
Right.
Okay, we will put some abbreviated version into here of that. Okay, role of board in closed sessions was your next one. Again, very, very basic. Board may only discuss items listed for closed session. The board must vote open. Information discussed during closed session shall remain confidential. Those are the real basics. It probably covers what you need to know. Okay, evaluation of the superintendent. This was one that, being one of those characters, I think you could add more to this one. It says evaluation will be done in accordance with state law. Yeah. Board president obtains input from all board members for superintendent's evaluation. Superintendent's evaluation is conducted in closed session. They don't have to be in closed session. The superintendent can request that they're in open session. I always ask for mine being open. And this is what I think that you as a board during a workshop or something, y'all really need to talk about, because these can be nasty times for superintendents, and you wanna make it as productive as possible. And having been the recipient of a non-productive one where you come out and you're so defeated the next day you can barely function, you don't want to do that. So this is one, manual, y'all may want to talk about as a group during a workshop, how you want to do this, especially with a new superintendent coming in. And I'll give you a suggestion. I think what you got are good basics. When I was in Temple, we started this in Salado, the board president, when he got all the comments from the board members, he put them all into a document. Every one of the comments was in there. And then he would do their ranking scale, and they all have rankings, and then he would do a composite rank, or she. Yeah, I had a couple of sheets in there. And then before that board meeting, he would sit down with me and go through that. So I didn't have a surprise at the board meeting. I knew it was exactly in that document. And that was a private conversation, it was a time for discussion, it was a time for reflection, it was not threatening in any form or fashion. And then we went to the board meeting, because I already knew it was in it, I never did an executive session. And so, for me, I felt protected. For the community, it was the utmost of transparency, the absolute utmost of transparency. A lot of superintendents don't want to do that, it's a huge risk for them. Rogers just went to that this last year, and he said it was the best one he's ever had. I guess from the superintendent's vantage point, if someone's going to abuse me in private, I just shouldn't abuse me in public, because they have to answer to the community. And so it's something for you to think about. That is the superintendent's option for the open. But I do recommend that the board president take time to visit with that superintendent and go through that composite report before a board meeting, because it just sets up a much, much more pleasant, constructive appraisal process.
Yeah. I mean, the goal should be no surprises, right? I mean, if
That's
we're doing our
correct.
job right, there shouldn't be any surprises when we get there
That's
anyway,
correct.
but,
Absolutely. You want it to be productive.
Right.
You don't want it to be, gotcha. Okay, so,
So it's discretionary with the superintendent, right,
on the open and close.
on the open and closed?
now, not according to what we have written, but,
No, not the way we
Right.
have it written.
But by law.
okay.
And that'd be true as anything in a closed session, when someone could ask that being open, most
Mhm.
don't. But I think, when you're, and this may be something you can even hold for your new superintendent, y'all talk as a team, this is a great team builder.
Mhm.
And talk about, what would be productive for you, and y'all talk about that as a team of 8.
I mean, I think that's a great change though to make as a starting point for the conversation.
Evaluations closed or open?
Well, just, I think how we conduct it, collect the feedback, have the president talk
Yeah.
one-on-one with the superintendent, and then come back and, hold the greater session, whether that's open or closed, that's,
Yeah,
whatever, but.
that's that person's choice,
Yeah.
but the other, yes.
But I can't find any issue with that process, right? I mean,
Where the superintendent talks to each board member individually, initially, or?
No, they send all their comments to the board president, who
Right.
compiles them. And she or he takes all those comments, they take the composite rating scale, if that's the method that you so choose, and they visit with that superintendent.
I do like that better,
yeah.
that part, I like
Right.
better.
I think board members feel more heard, that's what I've heard, because it was done in private, and it wasn't just, when you hear something for the first time, you don't know what to do with that. But when you have time to process it, you can actually do stuff with it. So anyway. So that one, again, I would suggest that y'all, this will be an open document, and will continue to work itself. Okay, meeting minutes. Does this need to be in there, is my question to you?
I mean, my reaction to reading this is duh, but,
Yeah, I mean, it's,
I was too. It's your document.
it's a technical term.
What do you want to do?
I mean, I think we probably have it written somewhere in the secretary's responsibilities already. I mean, it seems.
Must have been in there because somebody.
Somebody must not.
posted some
It's probably right.
30 years ago, and it didn't.
Yeah.
You don't need it, you don't have to put that one in there, it's up to you.
Maybe there was a time when the minutes were taking several months to be completed, and so this is setting an expectation that you expect to see them.
And setting the expectation that they're posted. Question is, how much of that is a requirement anyway?
All is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all a requirement, right? So, I don't know, I don't feel real strong about it, I can take it or leave it, but.
Manuel, what do you want to do?
it's neither here nor there for me.
Okay, we're gonna leave it then, okay, if it's not a here or there, and then y'all can keep deciding. Okay, board committees, this has really changed as of late. All workshops will be posted in accordance with Open Meetings Act, and those are workshops, and workshops and committees are two different things. And in your first paragraph, the board will, for the most part, function as a committee as a whole. Right now, you've got the 2 committees, we'll put those in. The, other one that's on the green side up here is there was, there's a team building by the board. You may want to include something in there on that because that's required each year. And I didn't see that
Yeah.
in yours.
No, not really. I mean, we've got the board training section.
Yeah.
And it talks about the goal of having 100% participation. I mean, if we're talking about nice goals to have, I mean, I know there's a recognition the board can achieve by having everybody on the board have so many training hours. I mean, I would love for us to be there. And I think we are this year. I think we will be there. Yeah.
It'll be announced in April.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just, I think everybody has to have 8 hours, I think.
I think it's 5 and 10.
Is it?
I think 10.
They changed it to December.
I was wondering, cause Connie came in and she said April, but yeah, okay. And don't they have to do it twice, like a December and a January
good?
now?
Right.
Hours one, good,
I'm not
hours
sure.
one.
Based on what
It
I
was
thought the threshold
December,
was, I
then
thought
they-
we were good actually for the first time. But
Yeah, but when does it need to be announced though? That's what I thought.
December meeting?
Used to be the month before the election,
Yeah,
now they moved it to December.
yeah, okay. And is there a 2 read? Is there one like December, one January, as far as you know?
Only if there's somebody hours.
Okay. Well, that's good to know too.
And that's in BBD, where you have, I think BBD might, it probably has some description of team building in there already, but it would be if you wanted to, I don't know,
There's 10,
7 months, you know,
there's
maybe.
10 hours for a new one. And
Oh,
there's,
yeah, there's gonna be additional training.
yep, that's right. So that's another one that we'll be getting through 114. And there's 5 for returning right now.
Yes.
I would like to see us increase the bar to whatever that level of recognition is. We don't strive to hit the bar, we wanna be better than the bar.
Well,
It's
and
my
that
own
would be
personal feeling.
appropriate for your, that would be appropriate for operating.
Right, that would be an operating procedure
That's
thing, right?
correct.
I mean, that's, yeah.
Okay. Other training components. One of the ones that some of them used was a new board training for just new board members. And basically what they did is they went through their operating procedures with new board members. Is that something that y'all want to do?
Yeah, actually, we've done that unofficially,
Okay.
so,
We did.
Okay.
yeah.
So that goes in SOP?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, assuming we don't have to duplicate it somewhere, but yeah.
No, I didn't see it any other place. Annual goal setting, do y'all have that? Do you do?
Yeah, we've done that traditionally too.
Okay,
Admittedly, they don't change a whole lot from year to year, but, we have been doing that.
okay. When do y'all usually do that?
I think we've done it right around the superintendent evaluation. Yeah.
Okay.
January.
Yeah. I mean, for somebody who's only done this once, like,
Good job.
got some recall.
I think you're right.
Okay. So we hit those. The other one they talked about, one of them was candidate workshops. And I don't know, I'm kind of lukewarm on that. Is that something that y'all done before, or done it both ways? It's always hard to get people to even run. Okay.
I feel like we did a Q&A session. I don't know, maybe not. I didn't get invited to the Q&A session.
Okay, now another one
Yeah,
that
that's
came
good.
up was, y'all done appointments lately.
Mhm.
And most boards do when you have unfulfilled terms. I mean, I think you came
I
in for an
was.
appointment. That's probably something that you need to put in your SOP someplace. And Angela, in our board policy, where are our appointments in that one?
BJB.
BJB?
I'm looking at it right now.
What was it?
BJB. Of course, I can't get it to open at the moment.
And that's just illegal.
Ooh, this is tagged with a P.
Interesting.
BJB-P.
What's that mean?
Good question. I don't know,
Alright,
but there's no local, right?
Mhm.
So all that policy states is your deadlines, for appointment, and when you have to appoint, and when you can let it sit open.
District must provide notice, for vacant position, yeah. Notice must be provided not later than the 10th school day before the date on which district fills the position. A bulletin board at central office. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty generic. On the district website, if they have a website.
basically you would need in something like this is if there's an incomplete term, the board may appoint,
Yeah.
repeat everything. Alright, going back to 5 now, we talked about communication, and this again goes back to when something's communicated to the board. I really like this one. I thought it was really clean, I thought it was really neat. Maybe fact or rumor, information could be on the district liability staff, is communicated to board members in accordance with open meetings, board requests the communication include answers to the phone, what's being done, how, when was the issue resolved. Manual, this kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier. And all information is to be shared equitably with all members of the team.
I think my only question here is really just the method of communication. And do we need to specify the method of communication? And I'm pointing the finger at myself, right? So I don't necessarily always have up-to-the-minute email access to my BISD email address, right? And so in some of the situations that are more serious, like if there's a way that we could do communication in another faster manner, right? Whether it's text message, whether it's phone call, whether it's, appropriate for whatever the situation is, right?
Some of the other policies have that,
Yeah.
text, phone.
Right.
So appropriate for situation, so something that is time-sensitive emergencies, texting.
Yeah, I mean, I think if, if it's life or limb, if it's, whatever. And I don't know what all those thresholds are at the moment, right? But, yeah.
Well, again, tonight, it's putting some bones in and then
Right.
bringing it back, so we'll work with that one some, Chris, and
Yeah.
bring it back to you. Okay, anything else on that communication section that y'all want? Pretty good.
I mean, I've appreciated the distribution of questions, right? So if one board member asks a question and the distribution of the questions, so we're not getting ourselves in any trouble.
Okay.
I mean, I've really appreciated
Right.
that.
Okay.
I don't know if that's something we wanna throw in here, but.
Sure. Yeah. In communication with media, again, official spokespeople are here. Board president is the official one for the board, that's that is standard. Speaking as an individual, and this was in multiple ways and multiple documents, and yours was
Yes.
pretty short and sweet. Which speaking as an individual, not as a board member, remind the meeting represented the position or the action of the board of trustees related to the issue in question.
In practice, I think we hold to this pretty well. The question is, do we need any more meat on it? I don't know.
Has this been a problem?
It hasn't been a problem,
Mm.
so.
I don't know if it ain't broke, don't fix it,
Yeah.
they say.
Angela, you haven't seen a problem legally with,
Okay, complaints to individual board members. This is an important section, really important. This is if you are ask at the grocery store or hardware store or church or.
Hold on, Mr.
On the
HEB is on
table.
the facility committee.
Right, that's right, that's true.
Doesn't that follow what the Round Rock
Mhm.
contacting the board and maybe
So
put
Yeah.
some of that language
Yeah.
It does.
in here, so it's a little, just clarified a little bit
Mhm.
more as a step.
We can do that. Round Rock language. Beautiful. Okay, roll up board in closed sessions. Did I go backwards? I went backwards, I'm sorry.
Yeah, although I think that's supposed to be a major highlight, like a major section though, right? I think it's,
Closed sessions, yes.
yeah,
Yeah, it
so that's
is.
just a formatting issue.
We can pull one that's a little more detailed for you if you want.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, I mean, I saw some of them that really went into this a little bit deeper, and that feels a little better to me to have this fleshed out.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, again, this is a source of protection.
Possible.
Oh, because
Top
we
of
got
what?
another.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Did you get it? Oh, I did. So we will add some more meat onto that bone. 5, we'll use the Round Rock language for that one. Building trust. You know, that really kind of came in on that ethics piece, because
Yeah.
there is a section that just says trust.
I marked this whole thing out if we were gonna use a code of ethics.
Alright,
Well, there's some things in here, I don't know, I guess I need to get back to the code of ethics and see if some of this stuff is covered, right, but, I mean, I know this first bullet here, I try to do as much as I can, you know, get questions out about the packets before
mhm.
the meeting, and I think this is more, this is about trust within us, but it's also the trust with the administration,
That's true, that's very true.
yeah.
Actually, I kinda like it. Well, what I can do is I can put the code of ethics, at least a
Yeah.
simplified version. I will leave this one in here for now, and then y'all can see them side by side. And
Yes.
then, okay, and then you can make a decision. Okay.
You know,
I wonder if you should change the title of that to be Building Trust Between the Board and Administration. I mean, because that title then
True.
clarifies
Mhm.
what's in that and why it's different from the code of
Yeah.
ethics. Cause
a
when
good
I look
point.
at this, I think it's really important. I mean, I look at
Yeah.
like the agenda item cover, that we supply enough information to you. I mean, it's a two-way,
it's a good point.
Yeah.
but I mean, maybe just a title change there.
Okay. I will do that.
I'm down with that.
Who's down with that?
It's
Brad.
At the top of page 6, now this is not that big an issue, but, it says here, the board member shall notify the superintendent as soon as possible of the request or complaint. Then it says, for example, if the board member refers the patron to the appropriate administrator to resolve the complaint, the board member should. Should it be shall, I mean, both times, or?
Oh, now you're getting me on the legal language.
Well, I just want to,
Well, we're gonna.
Which one's more forceful, remind me?
shall.
Okay.
Of course, we're gonna pick up our Round Rock language in here, so it may
Right.
really change, but I don't know if it's a should or a shall.
I mean, there's some things I've definitely referred to somebody and not let the superintendent know because it was so minor, like, I didn't know that you or Dr. Buchanan needed to even spend the time to know that it was going on, right?
I was thinking that
So-
it may not require,
Yeah.
Okay.
and you, like you're saying, there may be so many small little things
Right.
that are
Right.
very easily handled by call the CFO or call HR, that if you felt burdened by a rule that said every single time you
Right.
ever told them
Yeah.
that you do that, you had to report it, and that might become
Yeah.
clunky.
Although, again, sitting in the chair, you don't wanna be surprised, and usually
Right.
staff, if you've got good staff, they'll come to you and say, I've heard from.
Yeah.
But again, you're going into kind of a new era, and so you may want to think about do you notify, not ask permission, no, but do you notify the superintendent, or does staff notify the superintendent? Because you don't want to have anybody that's left out of the loop.
Mhm. I think it's a good conversation point for whoever the new superintendent is, right? I mean, how do you wanna be communicated with, right? I mean, it's a two-way, it's gotta be a two-way conversation.
I will put in there, it has a question mark,
Yeah.
and that will flag you all to have that discussion.
And maybe it's more important for a brand spanking new superintendent.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
But the shall probably should match, because this is a for example.
Right. Yeah, I don't know why when I read it, I just
Probably
circled
should.
it, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably should.
All right,
Shall.
now you're just doing this to
Shall.
confuse me.
You shall change it.
And then guidelines, at the bottom, guidelines for skillful team discussion.
I think a lot of these are covered in that code of ethics, right?
Again, all of these are based upon a point in time.
Yeah.
So if that was a problem with the board at one point in time, that's probably why they put it in there. It may not be that it's relevant at this point in time.
Also don't wanna take it out and have it become a problem.
Yeah.
Well, then you put it back in.
Or let's just say this is one of our core values and leave it, and then be done with it.
More core values, I'm gonna work with that. I'm gonna work with that. Board attendance at district events, and that was one that, visiting campuses was one, that was on another one, that I would encourage you to consider, and put it in here.
Visiting schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a pretty good one that Katie has on page 14 of theirs.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna put that one in there somewhere.
But I would say visiting also includes virtually. Like, I try to do that even when I'm emailing one of my kids' teachers, like, hey, the parent mode, like,
Yeah.
And that is
You know.
important, it really
Yeah.
is, Chris. Absolutely. Because, you don't see you wearing that hat all the time, but they will always see you as a board member. They just do.
I mean,
Okay.
it also tells the teachers and administrators, what the school board members can and can't do.
That's true, it's true, it's true.
If somebody, if I was a teacher, I wouldn't want, so what can they do, what can they not do?
well, as a parent, I don't want
They
somebody
ask-
just busting up into a school wandering around,
That's
right? I should have to
Yeah.
check in at the front desk whether you're a board member or not,
Yeah.
right? Just for my own kids.
The one thing board members need to be careful of, and whether you put it in here or not, is when they attend the district event and there's a group there and they may be sitting in different places, happens at football games, and they're just shooting the breeze. You need to be really careful about discussing school business items, because that's that walking quorum. I see Angela go, oh.
Mhm.
So whether we reiterate it here or not, but that may be really important.
I sit low in section F, nobody's near me.
Speaking of, I will put a little something in on walking quorums. I still think that people don't understand how easily that can happen.
Yeah, and update 114 will have new
Yeah.
language because the legislature
Yeah,
did update that language and try to
Mhm.
clarify what they meant by that.
I think that's really important. Okay, let's go back up here and look now at other items that you may want to put in there. We talked about the website information, that was the Round Rock deal. Talked about code of ethics, put that in there. Disruptions, I think it was Leander had a lot about disruptions at board meetings. Again, I'm not advocating one way or the other on that. Obviously, they had some real problems. Do you want anything else in there on that, or are you okay?
Well, I mean, it goes back to setting the expectation, right? And if we're gonna set an expectation about, how to conduct yourself during the committee, this is committee meeting, but during the board meeting, I mean, I would think that should be an expectation that we're setting as well, right?
Okay.
I don't know that it needs to be its own separate section, right, but if it's a bullet under wherever we've got the rest of
And
this.
maybe it's part of your website for parents and not your board procedures too.
Right. Yeah. mean, if anyone gets out of control,
We're gonna start with the website, I'll get you some wording, and y'all can decide if it goes there in your board operating procedures. We talked about steps to contact the board, that's clear. Board elections, that's all defined in your policy.
yeah, it's all policy.
Over and over and over
Yeah.
again, others had it. Okay. Appointments, we already talked about. Candidate workshops, no, you're saying no?
Yeah, so I'm not sure we need that. What do you think?
I don't know, right? I mean, if we were trying to set the district up to be as successful as possible and have the transition be as smooth as possible and really make sure people understand what they're getting into, I mean, it sounds like a good idea, right? But the devil's in the details and the execution of it.
You can always put may instead of shall.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if that somehow gives us leeway, I mean, I'd be okay with that, but, yeah,
We'll
just think
start
of-
with that and then go from there.
yeah.
Robert, what do you think about that?
For me,
Yes.
I don't know, it's kind of a mixed bag for me. It's so hard to get people to even run for the board in the first place. It's not like you have 15 sitting out there and you do a workshop, you know, you don't want to scare them off. So I don't know. I don't know that it's super important.
Maybe it would be nice.
Even if you, to me, even if you did a workshop, I mean, if I did a workshop, I mean, I still wouldn't know. I mean, until you get in practice, it's kind of like, you get out of law school, right? You think you're, oh man, I got, and then you get in there, you go, whoa.
Yeah.
I'd like to say we have the option.
Yeah, you know, I'd say too, you know, if you've got a really contentious board at some point in the future, you may wanna do some board workshops. You may wanna lay it up before they ever run, this is how things need to operate. And that's happened before too, so
Yeah.
use it as kind of a preemptive strike.
If you do it, you just have to make sure that every candidate
That's right.
has the ability to.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just trying to set the tone before they, or if you know some real controversial ones that are running for the board and you wanna set that tone, that may be another way to use that workshop. Okay, board evaluation. By policy, you're supposed to do a board evaluation every year. Have you been doing that?
I would say we've had a conversation.
Okay.
Now, if you asked me if it was written down, I couldn't tell you with a straight face.
It's required as part of that team building. You know, that section, when y'all go through the expectations of the role of a board member,
Mhm.
and the
Yes.
facilitator is required to have discussed that with you and asked you to reflect on how you're doing. I think that's.
Is
We
that an
did reflect on
annual
how we were
requirement?
doing in our team
And I
building.
think that's
Yeah.
probably what has been,
We kind of did that when we were doing when the TASB guy came.
Right,
yes.
right, yeah, we definitely had that conversation there,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Is that an annual?
Isn't that
Yes.
where they're given that big template? Cause I
Right.
conducted a board team training
And
and
that's
we
a
used that
requirement.
template, and I had to
Yeah.
go over that.
And that's important, you know, if you feel like, if TASB does it or Region 12 does it or whatever else, that you really don't get a good evaluation of what's going on with your board, that's worth doing a workshop.
Well, it gives you feedback and
It
I mean, it
does.
helps you. It helps you as a trustee to, you know, you need to wake up to an issue or may just be better at it. Good job.
And, you know, some boards just do, like student achievement, that becomes their board evaluation. I don't recommend that. I think that is certainly part of a board. But part of a board too is how do you function together? How do you function as a team? How do you work with the administration? You know, how do you have vision and move the district forward? I mean, there's other components that you as the ultimate leaders
Right.
need to address. Okay. Moving on down, role of board members was in one of them. No, I think it talked about president, that's all delineated policy,
Yeah.
so I don't know
Yes.
this one. Parliamentary procedures, I like that one, you know, I talked about that before, it talks about Robert's rules.
Robert's Rules of Order.
Mhm.
I mean, if you look at Leander, or I think it was Leander.
Will you search Roberts? Can you just put Roberts in search term?
In the search term, yeah. Specifically under section B, or?
And if you just search Roberts, see if it
Mhm.
shows up. Seems like I read that.
Okay.
Somewhere.
Oh, hey, here we go, BE, local,
Mhm.
and you're good.
So maybe you only put, we do follow Robert's rules. I mean, you don't go into detail, but you say we do follow Robert's rules. So something simple.
Yeah.
Violations. Right now, y'all get along really well, you've got a good board, everybody's kosher. Violations on this one were people that violated the code of ethics and communication with the board. And there were two of them that had those. That's one y'all need to talk about. You need to talk about it as a whole group, because if you have one and you're to that point, man, it can tear you up.
You know, I keep going to Katie, because I just said all the ones that I read, I mean, Katie seems to be pretty good. They have on page 18, they have A and B, 1 through 5, violation of board operating procedures, and what happens if you do.
Well, let's go with that. You said page 18?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go, okay. Okay. Yeah, so we do cover A elsewhere. That was, I don't remember where it was, but I'll read that somewhere in ours.
Well, again, if I pick that out and put it in there and you see replication or
Yeah.
duplication in there, then you can strike out if you want. But at least it'll be in there and you can work with it.
That's good to have.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
I think it's good to have.
Yeah,
Okay.
Because then you already have some guidelines about how to
yeah,
address
it's about
it.
how we're holding each other accountable.
Yeah,
right?
you've got some dog fights going on.
At least then you have something to fall back
Yeah.
on, rather than your board president having to figure it out for the first
Right.
time. If
The
you've
board
already talked
president
about
has
how
some-
we're going to solve that problem.
Right.
That's nice.
Ooh, that'd be horrible.
I
What
had
was the
that-
other one that you
I
liked?
had that slide on, it was bad.
You remember which district was the other one you liked?
Just, I mean, this is the best one.
Oh, that's,
yeah.
okay.
All right, and then closed sessions we already talked about actually. And this is one that I think we covered in things that was
Yes.
our earlier conversations, I think we're good on that one. What else can y'all think of that needs to go on there?
I read in one of these something about the board member's responsibility to vote, as in like vote in the meeting, right? And not to just abstain because, right, but the only reason to abstain is if you've got like a real legal conflict of interest, right? Now it's just,
Not necessarily. The decision to recuse oneself is personal, so it doesn't have to rise to the level of a legal conflict.
so one of the ones that I looked at though, actually it did specifically lay out, hey look, like you're expected to vote unless you've got a legal conflict of interest.
Oh,
I think if you can't remain impartial,
there you go.
I think you have a
Right.
duty to recuse.
There you go.
Right.
Agreed.
It's a subjective
Yeah,
standard.
no, I get that.
Yeah.
The question is, do we need to actually,
State
we need to
that.
say that, right, and what the expectation is as a group, right? Again, I don't know that we have the problem, but.
Well, we'll put it up
Well, we're
there
setting
again,
things
you
up
can look at
for
it.
the future too,
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right?
yeah, like, I mean, we're here to make decisions.
Right.
All right, we will add,
Right?
Yes, sir.
we will add that to the list then.
I mean, and sometimes the decision's gonna be uncomfortable, right, but we have to make the uncomfortable decision.
Well, I didn't know that at first. I mean, I thought, well, I don't have a legal, I mean, I'm always thinking, you know, that if you've got a conflict, but
You can't be impartial.
you can't be impartial, you got to ship out.
Right.
All right, so you will get another draft next time. I'll make mine work. Let me see what I can get back to you then. It is 6:35, and if it's all right with you, I'm going to table the B series for right now. And really for two reasons. One time, the second one is when Angela and I talked this afternoon, we've got so much coming in on 114 that may change a lot of this. And I hate to keep you any longer if it's gonna change. So. All right, so.
But these highlighted ones are specifically the ones you wanna talk to, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I went through them and I highlighted the key points of those, because I just think it's so important that you know policy, especially with these series, because that's yours. And, so once we get to 114, my guess is we're gonna be going through all of these in one.
Okay.
Yeah, and Angela's already started working through all of that. How many pages for just the legal?
955.
Whoa.
So be glad that I'm tabling this one for the moment.
Can I get the picture?
Yeah.
I'm on page 300.
Hats off to you
It's
on that
become
one.
complicated, hasn't it?
Very. If you were to print your policy manual, it would be 6 4-inch binders.
What a change.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's 10 years ago, it was 1 4-inch binder. Okay, so you went through vaping, you know what's about to happen on all of that. Thank you, Mike, for going through all that one. You got through your board operating procedures, and so we will refine, bring back another draft for you to look at. You will get that back next week sometime, and then we'll table the other one. What else do we need to cover for tonight? That was a lot.
Can't think of anything else.
You'll do good, you really do.
Anything else, Chris?
Deanna, is there something
We
else?
didn't-
that we need to-
We didn't make any real significant changes, we just clarified things.
Yeah, you looked at a lot of information, you thought about the things that y'all might need, and you'll have it in there, and y'all can make another decision whether it's what you really, really need. When 114 comes out, I mean, you may refine again, but it certainly meets the letter of the law and that you've had your annual review. But the second part is it's laid up coming into a new superintendent, working with that
Right.
person too.
Good point on building trust. Yeah.
It's important.
All right, Angela, anything else?
No?
Mike? Fine. Boss? All right, then we're done.
We're adjourned, I guess.